Hey everyone. Um, I just got out of the shower not too long ago, so that's why my hair looks all funky and whatnot. But I want to discuss this recent issue, the issue that's got everyone talking right now, and that is the Texas fetal heartbeat bill. Um, and just on this topic of abortion in general. Because not just when it comes to this bill in Texas, but just when it comes to abortion as a whole, I feel like there's a lot of black and whiteness, on both sides, and there's not really a lot of discussion about the nuance of this issue because I do think when it comes to abortion, there's a lot of gray areas, and to me, it's a very gray issue in general. Disregard that; that's just the oven. But yeah, I feel that it's a very complicated issue. Now, to get this out of the way with just right out of the gate, I am pro-choice. I am, politically, I am pro-choice. I don't think that the government or the state should be mandating I don't think it should be mandating anything involving the personal choices and decisions in the private lives of American citizens. I just don't. And quite frankly, I think that the hypocrisy is just soaring right now on both sides, quite frankly. Because you've got this abortion bill in Texas, and then meanwhile, you've also got this vaccine mandate that Biden is trying to, propose and whatnot, which is probably going to get thrown out. But, you've got one side that's perfectly fine with the government or the state stepping in to decide, on the personal decisions of private citizens, on one side, and then on the other side, they're opposed to that issue, but then with the other issue, they're totally fine with it. So you've got a bunch of hypocrisy on both sides. I oppose both things. I don't think that, the government or the state should be, like I said, I don't think they should be stepping in and deciding anything involving the personal lives of American citizens, of normal, average, everyday American citizens. I don't think that any higher power should be stepping in to decide the choices and decisions of anyone. I don't support authoritarianism, quite simply. But when it comes to this bill, and when it comes to abortion as a whole, like I said, I am pro-choice. I am politically pro-choice, personally and politically. Though I am pro-choice to a certain extent, I can't really say that I support third trimester abortion. I certainly oppose partial birth abortion, and I think that everyone should, but that's just me. And I think that at a certain point, because the most by the numbers argument that I see from the pro-choice side usually is the my body, my choice argument, which, yeah, okay, I mean, that is true. The woman is the one carrying the child, to term and whatnot, and is the one that's going to have to give birth to it and all that stuff. So ultimately, I do believe that the final decision should be up to the woman. However, at a certain point in the pregnancy, I think that we have to admit that at a certain point, it's obviously not just the woman's body. There is literally a body growing inside of the woman that is going to be birthed in 9 months, depending on what the ultimate decision is. So at a certain point, it technically isn't just, my body, my choice, because it's technically not just the woman's body. At a certain point, that is. I'm just saying, I think that's one thing that, the pro-choice side kind of has to come to terms with, that at a certain point, it's not just the woman's body. But again, that's not me, being in favor of, forcing the woman to have, a kid and whatnot, or forcing a woman to go through with the pregnancy. I'm just saying, I think that's kind of a gray area that, a lot of people on the pro-choice side, or more on the pro-choice side, sort of haven't come to terms with. And I think that we should just be upfront about that. But certainly at 6 weeks or a month in, or it's essentially just like a meatball. Essentially, it's like a plant. So now, I'm pro-choice. I take a more pragmatic approach to me being pro-choice, and it's really for two reasons. It's one, because of the social unrest that forcing, people to have children could potentially cause. There are so many parents out there who, quite frankly, shouldn't be parents for a number of reasons. You might have parents who were forced to have a kid because of maybe the state they were in or the laws at the time, or maybe they had lived in religious families that would, disown them for whatever reason, or maybe that's probably more be like teen pregnancy, but, parents who were forced to have the kid, who were forced to have a child, and didn't have the option of abortion. They have the kid, and they end up being resentful towards it. They end up regretting it every day, being resentful towards it, and which would lead to, kind of mental, emotional abuse, and maybe even physical abuse. And then the kid would eventually, of course, find out that they weren't meant to be, that they were a mistake, and their parents would probably own up to it. And in some cases, maybe even remind them, every day, or maybe not every day, but I mean, on occasion, they might say, yeah, technically you weren't even planning, we weren't even going to have you, but we're kind of forced to. And then so the kid, when they're growing up, they have to grapple with that fact, and then, it can lead them to think and do all sorts of things. I know it's kind of a slippery slope, but I mean, still, it can and does happen. So, in the case of abusive households, in those types of scenarios, and also just parents who are just not equipped mentally, emotionally, and even maturity-wise to have a kid. Because there's also parents out there who spoil their kids to death, who do not teach their kids about, responsibility, accountability, right from wrong. They basically just raise their kid to believe that they can do no wrong, that they never tell their kid no, they never, discipline them in any way. It's just whatever the kid wants, the kid gets, and that's pretty much it. I've got, or at least I had, a great aunt who I only probably met like once or twice in my whole life. She passed away a few years ago. I'm not going to get into that. But she has a son. And growing up, she spoiled him, just spoiled the shit out of him. Like, never said no to him. Gave him everything he wanted, whenever, all the time. And as a result, he grew up to be a drug addict and I believe a drug dealer too. I think it was a drug dealer, actually. I think he probably did drugs too, but I think he drug dealer. And now he's currently in jail. Like, when the funeral happened, he had to be, I guess there's something where they can, like, release you temporarily if it's, like, the death of a family member or something. I'm not sure exactly what it's called. I haven't looked into that. But, yeah, and now he's in jail. So there's that, too. There's parents who just do not instill values and, stuff like that into their children. Lessons, values, stuff like that. And so they end up growing up thinking that they can do no wrong. And that's how you sort of get some of these criminals out there. That can come from, growing up in traumatic households too, where like, abuse is going on. Again, mental, emotional, physical abuse and whatnot, because of resentful parents. And also because parents who spoiled their kids. That's kind of how you get some of these sociopaths and psychopaths who are because of as a result of the parenting that they had or lack thereof. So in my opinion, abortion is a counter to what could be a lot of social unrest, to preventing a lot of criminals and just a lot of baggage, or at least a lot less baggage that society would have to deal with, or at least that the rest of society would have to deal with. And then I'm sure the argument would be, at least from the standpoint of parents who, didn't plan for a kid, haven't prepared whatsoever. I'm sure that the argument from the more pro-life side would be that having a kid, I guess, changes people. It could change the particular people who were having a kid or didn't plan for it. It'll change their life. It'll, instill in them, a sense of responsibility and whatnot, and change them for the better, and end up becoming a great thing. And I mean, look, that has happened as well, where parents didn't plan to have a kid, but they kind of, messed up and got, and the woman got pregnant. And they didn't, like I said, they didn't plan to have a kid, but then they had it, and then it ended up being a really good thing. It ended up changing their lives for the better. And look, I mean, that's great for people that's happened to. That's awesome. Like, if someone out there who, has had a kid that they didn't plan for, but they had it anyways, and it did, affect them positively and was a positive change in their life, I mean, then that's great. I'm glad for those people. I mean, that's great. But that's not always the case for a lot of other people. And like I said, as a result, you end up with criminals, some of the worst kind possible, and just a lot of shitty people. I mean, you look at for example, I'm sure that an example a lot of you are familiar with is James Soroka. I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with him. Just look up what happened to him as a child, as an infant. Look at what happened to him in the home that he was growing up in. And like the horror of that, the physical abuse, the, emotional abuse and whatnot. And now look what he's become. I mean, the dude's a psychopath. I mean, we've seen that clearly. And that's what I'm saying, is that when you force people who are not properly equipped to have children just for the sake of having children, for the sake of birth rate, which is an argument that just never fails to annoy me with not all right-wingers, but some right-wingers and pro-life people. It never fails to just annoy me. Because, in my opinion, it is not worth the potential ramifications and consequences. I mean, I guess to some it is, but to me it's just not. Again, it would prevent a lot of social unrest that these people will potentially cause. And yeah, I admit that it is potentially. There are people who have grown up in abusive households and traumatic households who have, come out and have been able to make themselves better than that, who have been able to rise up above that and become good people. I recognize that. And I want to make that clear. I'm not I'm not like putting, I'm not generalizing all people who have come from an abusive household. I realize that there are a lot of people who have risen above and have been able to make something good out of their lives and whatnot. I recognize that, and I think that's awesome. Anyone who can do that is badass, in my opinion. But you also get people like Soroka, I mean, even like Onision is another example. Grew up in a household where his mother taught him that he could do no wrong, didn't properly give him any, mental, emotional abuse, physical abuse, but also spoiled him and taught him that he could do no wrong, essentially, and look what he became, And I mean, in a lot of cases, there are a lot of other people who go far beyond simply what Onision and the people like Onision and Soroka have done. They end up murdering people and whatnot. So I guess that's one reason why I am pro-choice. Again, just to prevent a lot of ramifications and consequences that would be caused by social unrest and, people who are going to be juvenile delinquents and then rise up to be something more, and end up being, a psychopath or a serial killer or something like that as a result of being raised or not raised in a very bad household for a number of reasons. So there's that. And then the other reason, and I'm sure that this, for this reason alone, I'll be called selfish for coming to my decision. And you know what? That's fine. I'll own up to that. This might be a selfish reason as to why I'm pro-choice. In fact, my entire standpoint on this issue, that is, my reasons for coming to this standpoint might be viewed as cold and callous and selfish. And I mean, fine, I'm willing to admit to that. I think that, generally speaking, human beings tend to be selfish. I think that human beings are selfish creatures. I mean, generally speaking, that's kind of it's not the most rose-tinted view of people, but, I do. I think that there's an inclination towards selfishness. It's just on us to rise above those inclinations and strive to be the best that we can be, But, yeah, generally speaking, I think that human beings are a selfish breed. But the other reason is, I am all for paying as little tax as possible. Okay, in I am one of these people in spirit and in principle. I do think that taxation is theft. I do. I'm sorry, but I think that if you work a job and all the money that you make from that should be yours. I think it's bullshit that it can be taxed and then the government or whoever can use it for whatever nefarious reasons they're going to use it for. I mean, a lot of the time it's used for the construction of roads and stuff like that. So I mean, in spirit, in principle, yes, I do think that taxation is theft, but ultimately the more pragmatic and realistic side of me knows that at least some taxation is necessary in the world that we live in. So therefore, I'm for as little tax as possible, but that's a whole different topic and whatnot. But yeah, I am for as little tax as possible. And what it really comes down to is I do not want to pay for other people's kids that they, again, did not plan for, did not prepare for, did not want in the first place. I don't want more of my tax money going towards the welfare state. And there are undoubtedly parents who will have kids just so they can get more off of welfare. There are people that do that. Now, keep in mind, I'm not opposed to welfare as a whole. I do realize that there are people out there who do generally need the support, who genuinely need to be on, welfare, who do need extra help. I get that. Whether it's, single parents who are generally, why do I keep saying that? Genuinely trying to, provide their kids with the best life possible, but they've just been dealt like a shit hand, and they're just having a really rough time. Like, I get that there are people out there who need it, and those would be, one of the groups of people that do genuinely need the support. So whether it's single parents or single parent households, or, people with, say, like debilitating mental illness or mental disorders. So, for example, like someone with really, really, really severe schizophrenia, for example, who literally cannot work because their schizophrenia is so extreme and so, bad. They would work otherwise, but because of their mental illness or mental disorder, I don't know if it's just an example, but because of that, they can't work. And I know that for a lot of people, for people who are in that scenario, it kills them that they cannot work because they would be working. So I do support, welfare for people like that. Single parent households, people with that. And then I'm sure there's several other cases as well. People with very severe physical disabilities and whatnot. There are people who do genuinely need the support. And if my tax money is going towards that, okay, fine, whatever. Fine. But if it's going towards something that wasn't intended to be in the first place and could have been easily prevented, but is happening anyways just because of a law that forces them to, that forces it to be, or not even because of that, maybe even because, the people who are having kids are just selfish and, who are just incredibly lazy, who do not want to work, but know that if they meet certain qualifications, if they have enough kids, then they can get that sweet government money from the welfare state, from welfare and whatnot, then they can get by. Yeah, I don't support that. Now, I guess for the case of people who just have kids all the time just so they can get that that sweet government money, I guess that's not really a case of whether they can get an abortion or not. But it does kind of sort of go hand in hand. But yeah, I don't, and that's the thing. There's, even with kids who the parents end up giving them up for adoption, they end up going into, these group homes, adoption agencies and whatnot. Again, I do not want my tax money going towards that. I do not want to pay for other people's kids that they didn't want in the first place. Yeah, that's my opinion. I don't want to pay, quite frankly, simply put, for other people's mistakes. And I hate to say that. That's a really harsh way of putting it, but they made a mistake and they fucked up, and now it's being forced upon the public, and I do not want to pay for it. I genuinely do not want to pay for it. Like I said, I think that there are people who do genuinely need the support, and if my tax dollars must go towards stuff like that, then I can be okay with that. But like I said, I am for as little tax as possible. And at the end of the day, the people that I am most concerned with are my family, my friends, Zach, and that's pretty much it. I'm not concerned with anyone else. The world is a cold, harsh place, and in my opinion, it's kind of every man, woman for him or herself. And your choices dictate whatever happens. And I don't think that your choices, or rather mistakes, should be, indirectly thrust upon me and other people. I don't think that we should have to pay for other people's mistakes and bad choices. So I guess that's really my other reason. And that's really the how I come to being pro-choice as a whole. Now, I do think that there are some compelling, pro-life arguments. I'm not someone on the pro-choice side who just writes off every single person who is pro-life as, hating women or thinking that women shouldn't have rights or something or something like that. I think it's bad to generalize any group of people, or at least most groups of people. Obviously, if you're talking about pedophiles and stuff, that's a different story. But generally speaking, I think that's a very flawed mindset to go by. I get the personal accountability and the personal responsibility argument. I've heard people who say that, well, if you're adult enough to, do the tango, then you're adult enough to handle the consequences that come as a result of it. And look, I get that. I understand that. I think that personal accountability and responsibility is a very important thing. But in this scenario, I think that trying to find a way to figure out a way to put this, to me, the negatives outweigh the positives in that scenario, in my opinion. I realize that there's a lot of people out there who will probably disagree with that, and that's fine. I respect that. But to me, it's not worth the risk. It's not worth the risk. It's not worth the risk of a kid growing up in a household where when they find out later on that they weren't even wanted in the first place. Growing up in a horrific household. Another scenario, this is an extreme case, but if a woman who's on drugs, who's on heroin or something, actually a perfect example, my best friend's half-sister, who, this happened to her. She got pregnant, and she was pregnant with this kid, and they actually did a drug test on her, and she was on everything besides marijuana. So, hard drugs, alcohol, all that. And she was pregnant with this kid. And I remember saying at the time, it would probably be best for that kid it would probably be best for an abortion to take place, honestly. And that's not something that I say lightly, and that's another thing that I'll address in a minute, but that is a scenario that I think that it is very, very necessary. And the thing is, with my best friend, with his sister, she is a mess as a person. Does not have her life together whatsoever, constantly getting with guys that are just shit. And honestly, she's kind of a shitty person herself, even my best friend would admit to that. And if he does watch this, hopefully that didn't, hopefully, yeah, anyways. But that's a good example. And then the kid was born with a cleft palate, and then I think there was a deformity on one of his feet. I can't remember exactly. But 6 months in, he ended up choking on his own vomit. So it was really sad. It was a very sad thing that happened. But to me, in those scenarios, being pro-choice, ultimately getting an abortion, in my opinion, is the more merciful thing, quite frankly. And again, I know that so many people will disagree with that and think that that's a horrible thing to say, but that is my opinion. That's my stance. And the thing with, the abortion, not taking it lightly, I think the thing that some pro-life people don't get is that abortions are incredibly, hard. It is not an easy decision, ultimately, for a woman to make. It is a tough decision. Most women who get abortions don't just skip in there and are happy about it, That's a very fringe, group of people, the shout your abortion types, which I think is just disgusting, but most women aren't, gleeful about getting abortions. It's a very tough decision, and in some cases they end up regretting it. So it's not a decision that's made lightly and off the cuff. A lot of thought goes into it, but that's not to say. And when it comes, and I'll say this as a final thing, and then I'll finally end this video because this is getting really long. But I am pro-choice. I will probably always be pro-choice. That's not to say, though, that I think that the way that an abortion is handled in terms of the decision that some women come to and whatnot, some people come to. That's not to say that I think that it's always with the best intentions or benevolent. There are some out there who will just go into abortion clinics and just get an abortion like it's nothing. Who maybe they are, promiscuous or whatever, and they'll get pregnant, and then they'll just, I guess I'm just going to get an abortion and just go in. I think that mentality is very, very just disturbing and disgusting. I think that for most people, abortions are very, very, very taxing things, emotionally, mentally, and maybe even physically, too. Yeah, definitely. For women, especially, of course. But, I'm sure that when an abortion takes place, it has to affect the man, too. And that's the thing, There's this whole thing about, and I'm going to go off on something else now, but I promise I'll end this video soon, but that's another thing, it's the man gets no say. It's not your decision, so you don't get to have a say at all. I disagree with that mentality so much. Like I said, I think the final decision should be the woman's. I think the woman should have the final say, the final ultimate decision. That being said, though, I don't think that means that the man shouldn't have an opinion. I think that men have every right to have an opinion on especially if it's their own, potential kid. Because, yes, the woman is carrying it, it is developing in her body, but it takes two to make a kid. And so that technically still is a part of the man. And I think that he should at least have an opinion in the matter. Not the final say, but just an opinion. I disagree with that mentality entirely. But yeah, so anyways, that was my long video on abortion. It was kind of rambly, but hey, that's kind of what you guys have come to expect with me. So hopefully I explained myself well enough. I recognize that I probably could have gone more in depth and explained myself better in certain areas. But I wanted to get my thoughts out there. I wanted to get my viewpoint out there. And hopefully I got it out concise enough and well enough. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. What's your stance on it? What's your position on it? I'll respect your position if you respect mine. If you're just going to call me, if you're just going to insult me and say that and say all sorts of things, then you're going to get ignored. But if you can respect my decision, my stance, whatever, on this, then I can respect yours. So that's it. Peace. Have a good day.